Welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. I'm Denise Griffitts, and today's conversation is one that I think will resonate deeply with so many of you, especially if you've ever chased success, checked all the boxes, and still found yourself wondering, why don't I feel happier? Today, we are sponsored by your mind stylist, Roberta Fernandez. Your thinking influences everything, your decisions, your confidence, your relationships, and your leadership. When your mindset shifts, I don't know why I can't ever say that word. When your mindset shifts, everything else can follow. With hypnosis and customized training frameworks, Roberta helps you identify patterns that just no longer serve you. She helps you release what's holding you back and reshape your thinking so you can move forward with greater clarity, confidence, and emotional intelligence. Connect with Roberta at yourmindstylist.com as well as on LinkedIn. And back to my guest, Todd Patkin is the author of Finding Happiness, One Man's Quest to Beat Depression and Anxiety. And I have that book, and his story is both powerful and incredibly relatable. From the outside, he had everything: business success, financial security, the kind of life many people strive for. But behind the scenes, he was struggling in ways that success alone just could not fix. So, what makes this conversation so important is that Todd didn't just face those challenges, he worked through them. And today he helps others do the same as a happiness coach. I love that. And what he calls himself a chief happiness officer. I can't talk today. Good morning, Todd, and welcome. And thank you for sending me your book. Before we get started, though, what would you like your audience to know about you?
Well, I'd like people to know that I grew up like a typical kid in the Boston area. I was bullied a lot. And I think a lot of people who are very, very successful, and you talk about their childhood, they're also bullied because it sets you up to wanting to be more successful than the people who treated you so badly. So from a young age, I wanted to get straight A's so that I'd beat the bullies who got C's. And as I said, that set me up for a long time right through college and right through my business to feeling like I always had to be successful and I always had to be perfect. And as I teach many of the people who I work with, perfection is actually a disease, Denise. You can never be perfect, but so many of us try to be perfect. And that's where a lot of our unhappiness comes from.
Or at least present ourselves as perfect. And those of us who have a thinking brain know that's not happening.
Absolutely.
And I see it all the time. Like, I grew up, I'm an introvert. I'm a highly committed introvert. I like people just fine for 3/4 of an hour. That's about it. 59 and 3/4 minute. I have to go home after that. But I grew up in a very loud, very chaotic household, and I was in pain a lot because I
Mm,
just couldn't take the noise and the raucous and the TV blaring. To this day, I live in a very quiet home, and that's by design. So,
mhm.
how we grow up does impact us. There's no question about that.
Absolutely.
So, I wanted to talk about your book because I think this is such an important topic. You had what most people would find as a success. So, take us back a bit. What was really going on behind the scenes? Was there a specific moment where you recognized that or realized that something had to change? You were not doing well.
Yeah, what happened with me, as I said, I was brought up feeling like I always had to be perfect. It was very difficult for me in college, and I'm not a dumb person, but I struggled a lot with homesickness and trying to get straight A's. And I went to Tufts University. People say in Boston, if you can't get into Harvard, you go to Tufts. So it was very difficult for me to get straight A's, but I did. By the time I got to the business, I think I was pretty burnt out, but I went into the perfect position for me, which was running our branch stores. So I was able to motivate a lot of people my age. And we did great. We grew by 20% a year. When we finally sold the business, it was a $100 million business. But I burnt out. A lot of people said to me, Todd, you can't work 80 hours a week forever. And what happened really with me, Denise, is I used to be like a Tony Robbins. During the meetings, I'd jump off tables and try to motivate people. And I did it one day in the warehouse because we wanted our store managers to spend time with our office managers. And I had regular shoes on and I landed on the concrete floor and I broke both my feet. I had
Oh,
grown up, yeah, ever since college when I suffered from anxiety and some depression and homesickness. What got me through it was working out. And people often say to me, what's the number one thing I can do if I'm stressed out and depressed? And it's really exercise, because that's the quickest way you can go from feeling down to feeling happy. So I broke my feet, and then my wife and I lost a pregnancy. And I think that's when it really happened, because I fainted and I was on the floor and they had to, help me up. But it was weeks later that all of a sudden, I started to struggle. And I went out to lunch one day with my dad, and the waitress actually asked me, Denise, if I wanted coleslaw or potato salad with my hamburger. And I actually couldn't answer her. I could not answer this woman if I wanted potato salad or coleslaw. And that's how fried my brain was. And then I got into a deep depression. I was suicidal for a couple of weeks. I wanted to die. And the truth is, what brought me out of it was medication. So obviously, you want to speak to a doctor before you take meds. But if you can't get out of bed and you want to die, I highly recommend you consider medication. That brought me out of it. And then I said to myself, Todd, you've got all the money in the world. You've been very successful. You have a beautiful wife, a wonderful son, and you wanted to kill yourself. Something doesn't make sense. And that's when I came up to my 12-week program to happiness, which I share with corporations across the country. And I teach that. I came up with 12 things that you should do habitually in order to be a lot happier.
Tell me about those. And normally I have the book in front of me. I have to just be, very real about this. When I'm talking with authors, I always have the book, but I have my very dear friend was just struggling and she's got the book and she didn't get it back to me in time. I never, ever loan books, but I know her. She's been my best friend for a long time. She just couldn't get it back to me in time, but I read enough of it. I've read it 2.5 to 3 times. So I'm very familiar with the book. And I'm going to just take a moment and say, everybody, it doesn't matter if you have depression now or you think you have had it. You're probably at some point going to have a really low point in your life. Get this book. I really recommend that you get it. Okay, Todd. So you describe your journey as a breakdown to a breakthrough. What happened?
So it was very typical of what I just said. I realized that I had it all, but I wanted to die. And so I asked
Every
myself,
time you say that, I just clutch my stomach.
well, the suicide rate's going through the roof,
I
especially
know.
among 10 through 17-year-old girls because of the iPhone, believe it or not. They
Oh,
see
I
all
believe.
of these
I believe.
beautiful girls, and they think they're not beautiful, or smart girls, and they think they're not smart. And so that's the age group we really need to be concerned about. But what I did is I created a 12-week program to happiness. It's my workbook. I teach it now on Udemy. I don't know if you heard of Udemy, but it's
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right. So I have a course on Udemy, but basically it's 12 things. And I start off with exercise. Exercise, as I said, is the number one thing you can do to be happier more quickly. And I recommend you don't, on the very first day, try to run a marathon, because then you'll never do it again.
Or lift weights. That'll stop you quicker than anything.
Exactly. And the second thing is just simply to listen to positive and motivational material. And the reason we have the first one and the second one first, because the other 10 are very, very difficult to do. So we want you to be ready physically and mentally. And the third week to me is the most important one, Denise. It's really taking it easier on yourself. Most of us say things to ourselves all day long, like, I can't believe how fat I am. I can't believe how stupid I am. How could I have said that to that person? And then the next day we come up with something else. So we're constantly beating ourselves up. And that actually affects you at the cellular level. They've done studies, and your cells actually move slower when you're beating yourself up. So I encourage people to step back, first notice it, and then during the first week, I want you to start to be kinder to yourself. So instead of saying to yourself, after maybe you had a fantastic speech for 59 minutes and you screwed it up in the final minute, and you go home and say, I can't believe how stupid I am. How could I have done that? I want you to say, boy, did I do a fantastic speech. I just messed it up a little at the end.
But people don't really care about that. They don't care nearly as much as you do. And you're talking about your inner dialogue. I'll be very frank with you. And we all have that inner dialogue that just kind of keeps rotating. in our heads, like, so, I, I look ugly, I'm fat, whatever it is, and we all do it to ourselves. Todd, if any living person spoke to me in a Walmart parking lot the way I speak to myself, I would need bail money. I wouldn't
Exactly.
tolerate it.
Yeah.
So why do we tolerate it in our own heads?
Right. I always say that, and I give a little anecdote. Came, if you drove to your friend's home and you walked in the front door and your friend was really crying, and you found out that she was crying because she had gone to the family dinner and she said something to her brother, and her brother was really upset with her, and she was worried he'd never speak to her again. What would you say to her? Take a break. It's not that big a deal. Let's go out for an ice cream.
Right,
But
take
if
a break and then give him a call when you feel better.
Right. But if you drove up to your own house and you actually walked in on yourself and you were crying and saying, I can't believe what I said to my brother, you would say to yourself, I can't believe how stupid you are. You did this years ago. Of course, he'll never speak to you again, and really make life hard on yourself. So, like you said, we treat ourselves worse than we'd even treat our worst enemy.
And it's a habit. It's an
Yes.
horrible, horrible habit. I've still got loops in my head that I recognize from when I was a kid.
I
It's like,
like the way you say that, because the way we talk about it, or Tony Robbins talks about it, it's like a record player with
yeah.
grooves on it. You're used to going to the right. We want you to go to the left.
And those groups are deep, 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 deep. I mean, they're just, you have to overwrite them, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the only way I can put it. You have to, and I do catch myself going, Denise, knock it off. And then I will deliberately say, I see that groove in my head. I don't want it anymore. I'm going to skip over, like the old needle, you just shove the needle and it goes to another part of the record. I'm going over here instead.
Right.
Kind of
They say,
works.
they say that a lot of times that the older you get, the happier you are, because you learn to laugh at yourself. I had a fortune cookie once, Denise, that said, um, the older you are, I'm sorry, the more you're able to laugh at yourself, the happier you'll be and the older you'll be. So as we get older, we realize when we make mistakes, just take a laugh at yourself. Don't take it so seriously. And I've been very effective at doing that. And I think that helps me a lot with my happiness.
It does help. And you have to be able to have humor. Look, I'm an introvert. I'm rarely around people. And that's by design. I need quiet. I need a lot of quiet. And so I talk to myself a lot. I talk to the ceiling fan. I talk to the cats. And I'll have something happen in the middle of a day and I'm just ticked off, like, Denise, really? And I start pointing that finger at myself.
Mm,
So then I will immediately, because I catch myself, and I do to myself that you're going to laugh at me. Do you know what a piche is?
no,
Okay, remember Uncle Bob? There's always an Uncle Bob at a family reunion or some kind
sure.
of gathering, and Uncle Bob's the one that nobody wants to talk to because he's an ass. And he would come up behind you and flick the back of your ear with his middle finger
Oh,
and thumb.
geez.
That's a piche. It'll stop you cold. So when I'm in that groove, I'm like, oh, no, you don't. And I piche my ear. It hurts. And I
Right.
stop. And
The
then I
other,
start laughing because it's ridiculous.
the other thing I really want people to understand as they go through my program, your children will always do what you do. So your children won't do what you say. If you say go to the gym, they won't. But if you have you habitually go to the gym, they will. So if you're constantly beating yourself up, they notice it and they
They
begin
do.
it as a habit to start beating themselves up. So I've had different employees who have said, Todd, it's almost like a cult in here. You're always telling people to be happy and not to do this, not to do that. And I've been able to break some of the hardest ones to break when I said, do you really want your kid to be like you? And that's when they say, Todd, help me, help me, help me. So, be aware that this stuff is difficult to change from beating yourself up to not beating yourself up. But do it for your kids if you're not going to do it for yourself.
I love what you said about you have to be aware enough to laugh at yourself. Like, I laugh at myself all the time. I mean, and you'll hear people, oh, I'm having a really bad day. I'm logical. I say, really? The whole day? What happened?
Smart,
For
really
one time
smart.
you got up in the morning the whole darn day. And of course it's not true.
Right.
It's just not. But I will every once in a while just catch myself. I'm mad about something or cranky. And then all of a sudden, and I don't even know where it comes, I call them God winks, something silly will pop into my head, or my cats, my giant ginger cats will do something that just has me laughing I'm no longer having a bad day because I'm
Absolutely.
laughing.
Yeah, and words make such a big difference too. If I come
They
home and
do.
say, "My God, I've absolutely had the worst day of my life. I'm in a really rough spot. I'm depressed." But if I say, today was just a little bit off, I'm feeling completely different.
And it's true, and if you I'll decide sometimes, this is how I kinda get out of my little funks, and they don't happen often, thank goodness, but I'll say, "Okay, I'm going to take 15 or 20 minutes, and I'm just gonna have a fit."
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, have you ever
yeah,
done that? And then after a while, you're laughing uncontrollably because you're being an idiot, and you can
yeah.
recognize that you're an idiot, so you just have fun with it.
Absolutely. So let me go over a few more weeks to share with people. The-
Absolutely.
One of them, which I think is really important, is if we play to our strengths. As we know, God has given all of us different strengths. So, Denise, you can do things that I certainly can't do, and there's probably some things I can do that you can't do.
Oh, no doubt.
So, I encourage people to take out a piece of paper and write down two different lists. The first list is what do you love to do the most? And the second list is what do you think you're better at than most people? And if it's on both lists, that's the stuff you should be doing, the stuff you love to do the most and the stuff you're better at than most people. And if it comes out that you should be in a social environment and you took the first job out of college or high school and you're basically working by yourself all day, that's obviously not the right spot to be in. So really focus on trying to live in your zone.
And I just made that list, I've got it all. I always take notes when I'm talking to my guests, so I opened up a new page, says list what you love, and then the other one is better at than most people. But you know what I have found? We often don't know that we're better at it because nobody tells us.
Mm,
We think that what is normal and easy for us is easy for everybody else. That's not true.
absolutely. The other thing you can do, this has to do with when people are lonely, because loneliness is now the number one greatest um, it's the new, according to the Surgeon General, it's the greatest problem today in our society is loneliness. And I often say to people when they're very lonely, just go out with someone and ask them, what are the five things you think I'm best at? Or what are the five things you like about me the most? And so that's something we work on as well.
Perfectionism, I think. And you were
Well,
talking about
I was talking
depression and
about
loneliness.
loneliness. And when you go out,
Right.
right, the idea is to go out with someone and ask them, what do you like the most about me? Or what do you think I'm best at? So through those questions, you can certainly find out the things that you're better at than most people. But to be honest with you, I disagree with you a little bit. I think most people know what they feel like they're better at than most people. Like I know that I'm certainly not good at changing a light bulb, but I know I'm really, really good with people,
Right.
better at than most people. So at least for me, it's pretty simple to know what I'm bad at and what I'm good at.
See, and the reason I said that, I was kind of thinking back to my own kind of recent history, and I remember I was with my best friend, we were driving to Atlanta. If you wanna drive to Atlanta, you better take lots of water, some
Oh
snacks.
boy.
That's a 10-hour drive, and then you get to Peachtree, and that's another 10 hours trying to get your way out of there. But we were listening to, I can't remember who it Wayne Dyer, and I had never heard Wayne Dyer. And we were just listening to that, and I was fascinated, and at some point, she asked me, she said, "Denise, do you think that you're a sympathetic, empathic person?" I said, "No, because 'cause I'm too logical. I'm very,
Hmm.
very logical." And she looked at me, she goes, "We're gonna have to talk about this," and she just flat told me where I was dead wrong. I
Right.
didn't know. I thought I was just logical. "Do this, nobody gets hurt, I'll fix this." I'm very logical. And she said, "I don't think you really are listening to who you are," and
Hmm.
that sent me down a wide path, and I still think about it.
Hmm.
I know. There are some things you just don't know.
Well, if you think 10 hours is bad, my wife convinced me to drive from Boston to Miami once because we have a little dog and he
Mm.
can't get on the plane. That was like the worst 3 days of my life. Just,
Try driving across Texas.
oh,
3 days,
oh my,
30 solid days.
oh my God, it was
I
terrible.
know, and I did it with a dog and 3 cats, so I
Oh,
I get it. I understand what you're talking about.
oh my God, I didn't realize you had a dog and another cat. That's amazing.
Yeah, I've got dogs and cats, but yeah,
Uh,
that was the worst drive of my life, seriously, and then I got out I got very, very curly hair, and I got out and hit humidity, and I had to buy a cap because I
Oh my
couldn't
God.
control my hair. It looked like haggard hair.
Oh
I
my
had to
God.
yeah, I had to put a hat on my head for, like, 2 days.
Amazing.
Man, that
Another week that I want to share with people is living in the present. We actually only spend 49.6% of our time in the present. We spend 50.4% of our time in the past and the future. What I mean by that is when you're swinging your little son or daughter on the swing set, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about the enjoyment that you're having right then? Or are you thinking about the assignment that you have at work or the person who did you wrong in the past? So, first, you want to look at the past and you want to figure out what's really bothering you the most. And usually it will be a relationship. So, if somebody really did you wrong and you're still really upset about it, which I think all of us have at least one situation like that, and you can't call them up because you're just too upset about it, at least write them a note. You don't have to send it to them, but get that off your chest. And fear of the future is a huge one and affects most of us. You're fearing things that probably will never even happen. In fact, they interviewed a 101-year-old woman and asked her biggest regret. And that's exactly what she said. I spent so much of my time worrying about things that never even happened. So most things you'll find that you're concerned about, they won't happen. And even if they did, they won't kill you. Let's say you're worried about losing your job, and you do a decent job. So the chance of you actually losing it is probably less than 50%. And you're thinking, if you do lose your job, it's the end of the world. I won't be able to pay my mortgage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, you do find another job. Maybe you even enjoy it more. So we've got to stop being so fearful of things that might happen in the future and move on from things that are upsetting you in the past.
I agree with you, and anxiety is something that so many people are dealing with on top of everything else. And honestly, for the last several years since COVID, as far as I can remember, it seems to me that the world at large is dealing with a low-level sense of anxiety.
Yeah,
We just
food.
don't know what's gonna happen. Where are we going, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Food actually has a lot more to do with our anxiety and depression these days than most people realize.
Oh,
The
let's
food,
talk about that because I think, I really we need to know what you wanna talk about, but I think the garbage that we eat is just so awful.
right. And even the steaks that we eat, like we're not
Right.
eating the same food that we ate when we were children. There's so many more chemicals in all the food that we eat that, unless you're eating things that are more natural and you're going to the local farms out there, you're really eating things that are affecting your brain in different ways that they're making you depressed and anxious.
You know, I
Among
have
what you said,
found yeah,
among
I
what you said, people eating the potato chips and eating the ice cream
yeah,
and
yeah,
the sodas.
put that stuff away. I've noticed as I've gotten a little bit older that some foods just it's instant inflammation. My brain, I swear to you, I think it swells up. I don't eat white bread, and I live in the South. We eat rice with everything. I had to give up rice, white
Mm,
rice, but I can I mean, within minutes, I get sniffly, I get congested, and my brain gets foggy for about 15 or 20 minutes. That's scary.
mm. It really affects you. You have to be
It
careful of it.
does. Yeah, I just now I know just don't touch it. I mean, if I do touch it, I'm gonna feel bad for a while, but then I get to wondering what's the long-term effect of this? This may be a 15 or 20-minute thing, but if I keep doing this, what's it going to do ultimately? Do I come down with Alzheimer's? These are things we should be thinking about.
Of course. And all of the injections we had from COVID, they're finding more and more people are getting cancer. They had a lot of young sports stars, having problems with their hearts. So we know that the shots that we got from COVID were really bad for us, as
Yeah,
well as the food.
I
And
avoided that. I refused.
that's great. Another thing that I like to talk about, if you could do all the things that I'm recommending, but if you don't do number seven, it can really sabotage you. And that's trying to hang out with more positive people than negative people. A lot of us have negative people in our lives that are constantly pulling us down. We say in Boston, they're like crabs in a bucket. If you have 8 crabs in a bucket and one's trying to get out, all the other 7 crabs pull them back down. So you can be doing all these things. I'm working with you, but if your friends are so negative, they'll pull you down. So I recommend you make a list of the 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with and rank them on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being they're incredibly positive. Everything is great. They lift you up whenever you're with them. And 1 being they're incredibly negative. You could be having the best day of your life and you spend 10 minutes with them and they pull you right down. And then what you want to do is you want to add up those numbers. So you have 5 people, and let's say you have, 2 5s and 2 2s and a 1. You add those up, and that's 15, I believe, and you divide it by the number of people you have, which is 5, and you're averaging a 3. Now, let's say you averaged a 1 or a 2. You absolutely need to make changes with that group. Now, I'm not telling you immediately to make a change with someone who's terribly negative that you've been friends with since high school, but I am telling you to speak to them and say, I'm working on my negativity. I'm taking a course. I'd love you to take a course or a similar course because I really think that you're pretty negative as well. And if they don't take the course, then you speak to them again and say, to be honest with you, if you're not willing to take a course, I'm going to have to spend a little bit less time with you because you're pulling me down.
And I wanted to ask you about toxic family members. We all have them. And so many people say, "Oh, it's my brother, it's my mom. I can't cut them out." Yes, you can.
Yeah, you really have to. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that if you're used to talking to them every other day, so you just talk to them twice a week. We're not going to cut them out completely, but we're certainly going to lessen how often we speak to them. You can't say to a family member, "I'd like you to take a course that's more positive, or I'm going to speak to you less." It doesn't work. You can do that with friends, but not family members.
Family is difficult. We have so many perceived and actual bonds that exist, and some of those bonds really don't exist. We just think they do. But I have had to, cut a family member or 2 just completely out of my life, and it didn't feel good, but it was the right thing for me to do.
Of course, of course. Well, just don't do it with your mother.
Now my
All
mother
right.
passed. No,
Oh, I'm
we
so sorry.
we used to speak all the time,
Oh,
and
that's great. That's
now
great.
I can't
Well,
pick up the phone and just chat about any old thing, but I miss her.
hmm. I always say with your parents, if you got in a fight with them or anything, you need to get past it because you don't know how long they'll be here. You need to spend time with them.
Yeah, that's exactly right, if you can,
Yeah.
I mean, I had a grandmother that I frankly never liked her. I didn't like her from the time I was a small child. Knew there was something wrong with her. I knew there was something off. She was just a miserable, wretched woman. I did not want to be around her, and as soon as I could, I just quit talking to her.
Mhm. When we talk about family, the number one thing that they find in terms of being happiness is relationships. So if
Right.
you have a lot of close relationships with family and friends, you'll be a lot happier than if you're alone. We talked about loneliness. And so
Yeah.
they even spoke to a Vietnam veteran who was a POW, and they said to him, "What was the worst thing in your captivity?" And he said, "It wasn't the terrible food and it wasn't the beatings, which were almost daily. It was the lack of being able to talk to somebody for all those years." So as human beings, we're social human beings. We need to have contact with other people.
We really do, and even for somebody like me who really is an introvert, I was born this way, I'm never gonna change. This is where I live, but I do need to talk with people. It may be on the phone, it may be through an email, it may be in a grocery store. It could be
Absolutely.
anywhere because we are social creatures. I'm not social and, that I'm going to put on my dancing shoes and go out. That ain't happening, hun, as we say in the Deep South. But I do have to have close, personal, trusted people,
Right.
sister, my mom, she's gone, and, my brother who also passed away, he had a
Oh my God.
he had a double lung transplant, and he lived 8 years, so
Mm,
we had him that long, but, now that they're gone, I really treasure what I did have with them,
of
and,
course.
those memories don't go away, so you've still got that, but, yeah, you do need trusted confidants, people who will go, "Denise, what are you thinking? What the heck was that?"
Right. And
And
life is so much sweeter when you have friends. Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
turned 60 a few months ago and I had the greatest party with 20 of my friends. And Sure, it would have been nice to be with my wife, but it was a lot nicer to be with 20 friends. And they'll be there when times are tough and they'll be there when times are good. But I did want to also say that don't ever underestimate the effect you can have, even on people you don't know. You talked about being in the supermarket. There was a man who was very, very depressed, and he was on a bus, and this is a true story. And he said to himself, I'm going to kill myself today if the bus driver treats me badly when I leave the bus. And if he treats me with kindness, then I will not kill myself. And as he got off the bus driver said, Guy, just get the F off the bus. And the guy went to the bridge and jumped off. And the reason we know about this story is he broke most of the bones in his body, but he survived. And so you just don't know the effect that you can have on others as you go through your day.
You don't, and I have to tell you that story because, I'm in the South. Down here, everybody says hello. They wanna talk to they wanna hug you. I don't wanna be touched, but,
Hmm.
they're gonna do it anyway. But I was in the grocery store, and there was this lovely woman in front of me, we're in the checkout stand, and she was probably in her early to middle, late, 80s, and she was beautiful. She was perfectly put together. She actually I looked at her, I thought, "That's what my mom's gonna grow up to look like," 'cause she was little, and she was wearing these little capri pants, and her hair was beautiful. She had a little light makeup on. Her nails were done, and she had the cutest sparkly shoes on. And I couldn't help myself. I said, "Hey, I love your shoes." She lit up. She just
Mm,
did.
mm.
And then as soon as we both made it through the checkout stand, we went and, took our buggies over to the windows and we stood there and talked for an hour.
Oh, that's
I've
so nice.
never seen her before or since, and I suspect she's probably gone, but I think about her all the time.
Yeah. And it's interesting how everything you're saying leads into my next thought. I say to people that one of the keys to happiness, and it's number 11 on my, my list, is being friendly. Because let's say that you're down and you're not feeling good. If you just go out, like to the market, and you start lighting somebody up, just complimenting them, you notice that the checkout guy's name is Tom and he did a good job. And you say, Tom, you're the best checkout guy I ever had. Now, Tom says to the next person in line, boy, you're a super guy or have a great day. It affects that person. Now he goes home and he's nicer to his wife and the kids sleep better because the wife and husband are, beating each other up. So just a simple conversation can make such a difference in so many people's lives.
Well, if we're reflecting it back and it's good and it's positive and it's kind, we're obviously going to reflect that out.
Of course, of
I mean,
course.
that just makes sense. So, how many of your how many did we get through? I know we've kind of jumped around a little bit.
Well, we've hit most of the ones that I think are important. Let me talk
Okay.
a little bit more about the book, if I may.
Mm, please.
Um, the reason I wrote the book is I spend a lot of time now with kids in school. And they remind me of how uncomfortable I'd feel when I did something and I was embarrassed. And we all do things that are embarrassed. I took a beautiful girl to a high school cotillion and I was wearing, I think it was work boots at the time. My parents say there's no way they would have let me wear work boots, but whatever I had in my feet, the minute she saw them, she was aghast. And then I took her to her prom, and in front of all of her friends, I proceeded to take the chair out from under her, and she sat on the floor because I didn't push it back. Well, this has bothered me till today. It's funny how things like that can affect you. And other things that, have come up in my life. I was bullied terribly as a senior in high school by a girl. And you think you're the only one in the world. And so I wrote my book because I really wanted young people as well as old people to realize that we all do things that aren't that smart. I guarantee you that Donald Trump or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, at least once in their lives, went into a board meeting and had their fly down. But we do it and we think we're the only one in the world. So I really wanted to let people know that, you know what, give yourself a break. It's not the end of the world. We all do things like that.
And you've mentioned bullying a couple of times. I I read about it. I see it all the time. I don't understand it. I
It's
don't
so
understand.
painful. It's so
Yeah.
painful when you're bullied. I was bullied so much.
But
Uh,
why do people do it? Is there any kind of baseline where you can just immediately say, "Oh, you're a bully"?
Well, it's insecurity. It's interesting. The girl that bullied me, God works in mysterious ways. I ran a company and her husband worked for me. And so
Oh.
I didn't know that. All of a sudden she showed up at one of our Christmas parties and I found out that she was with this guy. And so when I wrote my book, I called her up and I said, Jane, you ruined my senior year. Every party we went to, you made fun of me publicly in front of everybody. Why did you do it? And she said, I was so insecure that I needed to pick on two or three people to make myself feel more secure myself. And I think that's why bullies do what they do. You know, they're feeling so unhappy with their self or insecure that they want to, in front of everybody else, make themselves feel more powerful.
I've always viewed bullies as cowards.
Right, right.
The minute you say, "Knock it off," or you turn around, you punch them in the nose, they're on the floor crying.
I think a lot of that is true, but with boys, with me, I wasn't the tall guy. I certainly wasn't a strong guy, and a lot of the people who bullied me were a lot bigger, so I was afraid of them. But the other thing is we're so embarrassed we don't tell our parents. When I finally told my dad about this when I was 30 years old, I said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" And even if you do tell your parents, you're terribly uncomfortable if they get in the middle of it because you're afraid that, the bullies will tell all the other kids. So bullying is a really terrible, terrible thing. But as I said, I think it makes us stronger. And many times it makes you even do better in life because you become a perfectionist. Now, being a perfectionist, as I said, is one of the worst illnesses you can have because it's something that our society rewards. So unlike other things, we think it's the best, thing. Our parents are telling us it's so wonderful you got this new job. And just like when you're in soccer, you score a goal, everybody's telling you how great you are. But it's getting you off course. For example, what would you like your tombstone to say? That Bob was the greatest worker at A and B company, or that Bob was a wonderful husband and father? And most of us would say would prefer it to say husband and father. But
Yeah,
if you
loved and missed,
but
that kind of thing.
but if you're working 70 hours a week and you're not seeing the kids at all and you're not having a date night with your wife in 6 months, which direction are you going in?
That's a good question because if you're and that goes back to what you were talking about earlier, being present. And it's difficult to be present. It really is. I'll catch myself going, "What? Why are you doing this and thinking about 14 other things? Stop it."
Hmm.
And I have chats with myself all the time, and a lot of them go around, "Denise, take a moment. Stop it."
Yeah. The other thing that I like to talk about is the quality time myth. They say to people at work, you can work all the time and just give a really great hour or two to your child. And it's quality time. It was a great hour. It's okay. And it's just not true. Kids want quantity of time. They want you just to be there when the dog jumps on them and their ice cream falls on the carpet. It's something they remember forever. But you wouldn't have been there if it wasn't about quantity of time. And that's why a lot of kids love their mom even more than their dad because she's just with them all the time. So don't get tricked into this idea that you can just give them one good hour a week.
And I'm trying to figure out how to say this because 'cause I've seen it so many times, but people, children, adults, all of us, we're not remembering or built by those big things that happened. We're remembering the small things.
Perfect. Exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Like, I can go outside right now, there's clover all over my backyard because I'm in the deep South, and we know that spring has sprung. When I go outside and I see the pecan trees are budding, like, "Ooh, the ground is warm enough, I can plant." Those are the things I remember. What the ground smelled like when I started digging into it, and that takes me back to a lot of other memories. I mean, those our memories, I think, are nostalgia in so many ways, but they're small.
Yeah, that's what you remember with your parents. I know you said
Yeah,
your mom passed, but
yeah.
maybe you don't remember the birthday party that was the best. Maybe you remember, doing the planting, or maybe if you were a soccer player, maybe kicking the ball with your mom. It's the quantity of time, not the quality of time.
I agree with you, and I think it's difficult for people to kinda divorce themselves from, "Okay, I've got," and they're frantic in their own minds, "I gotta do this. This has to be done, blah, blah, blah." You'll drive yourself crazy.
Absolutely.
And
And
I've
then
done it. So
I know.
I'm speaking from, experience here. I've had to learn not to be as much of a perfectionist as I think I used to be.
Right. Well, we're definitely our own worst enemies.
Oh,
The
yeah.
brain can be, your greatest asset, but boy, can it be the worst enemy, that you have. And that's really what my book is about. And if you want to go on Udemy, it's only $27.99. It gets you my full book that Denise was talking about, which is normally $25, and you get the workbook, which is normally $15, and you get all my videos as well if you're interested.
And I was on Amazon last night. I think the Kindle version is free for right now if you have the subscription.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. The role of giving back. You emphasize philanthropy and giving back. So, how does that connect to happiness? I mean, it's
Any,
not, in my opinion, it's not just, you've got a, monthly thing that comes out for wounded warriors or, um, what is that hospital Danny Kaye started? Um, St. Jude's. And I
mhm,
do, I support all of them, but I don't get the warm and fuzzies over it. It's just something that I do.
right, right. Well, that's why they say, it's a lot of times if you actually give of yourself rather than just the money.
That's where I wanted you to go. Let's talk about that.
Well, we know that givers are always happier than receivers. A lot of receivers are uncomfortable getting gifts. And I tell them, get the gift, not for yourself, but because it will make me happier or the person giving the gift. Givers are 40% happier and 25% healthier. So it makes a huge, huge difference. I do a lot of philanthropy. I was fortunate, and I have, the resources. And even though it's just money, it still makes me feel good because I actually visit with, in India, I have a charity. In Israel, I have a charity. So I'll actually go and visit and see the effects. They're both for kids. One is for runaway kids, and one is in India for kids who were actually sold into prostitution. So I'm not doing it, but I'm seeing firsthand and meeting the kids, and it just makes you feel fantastic.
Well, it's very different than seeing, one of these commercials, which they just drive me crazy because I know they're not real people and they're highly, nuanced, if you will. But it's like, you've got the starving kids and then you've got the grandmas in Russia who are eating dirt,
Yeah,
which I don't believe for a moment. Yeah. And what you're saying is when you can go see them, or with me, I like to go visit animal shelters.
yeah, I'm big on animals. Oh,
Me too.
oh my
I,
God. This television shows on TV, they break my heart.
yeah. And, I just lost my 21-year-old feline. She was
Oh,
21 years old, and,
oh my God.
well, it broke my heart because her and her sister who died a few years ago, she was almost 20, then I had a ginger girl who was almost 20. I lived with those 3 cats longer than I did any human being.
Oh my God. You must be really good with these animals if they live that long.
Well, they eat well. They're indoors, their little paws don't touch the
Yeah,
ground.
but you give them a lot of love, and then
I
they
do,
have they
I
have
do.
their brothers and sisters there as well.
Yeah, yeah, but, you know, that and I don't need any more. I had my sister said, "Well, you gonna get another cat?" I said, "Oh my god, no." That is not my option, though. One will show up. It's just gonna happen. They come to the door, I kid you not.
That's
But
amazing.
they do there's an invisible sign over my head that Schmuck lives here. I mean, that's how they all landed here anyway. But
The
I
other thing I just want to talk about is being grateful because
yes.
today so many of us think we got the raw end of the stick. And it's, again, it has a lot to do with social media. You see the family and they look so happy and they're on vacation. And the truth is they can't stand each other and they're just taking that one good picture.
Yeah, and the
Um,
kid's been driving them crazy. I know.
and, you look at the neighbor across the street and he has a brand new Mercedes and you're so jealous, but you don't realize that that neighbor across the street has been trying to have a baby for 4 years and so many in vitros, and he'd give you 10 Mercedes if you could just have one child. So we
Mm,
need to realize that we all have things that are going tough for us. And so you can always look to the left and see all the people that have more than you. And you can definitely look to the right and see all the people who have less than you, and you decide which way you're going to look, and it makes a huge difference in your life.
It really does, and if you're paying attention, this goes back to empathy, and I don't mean suicidal empathy, I mean just paying attention. If you are just quietly observing people or listening to them, you can pick up a whole lot more than they are actively saying or doing, and maybe they need help, and you might be the person to step up and say, "Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Are you okay? Do you need somebody to talk to?"
That's huge. Everybody has something that they're carrying on their back, whether, their son just found out that you just found out your son has cancer, just lost your job. Everybody has something going on. I say it's like a big sack that they're carrying in the back of their shoulders. And I want you to be a lamplighter, somebody who lights them up even for just an hour.
Understood. Let's talk, and you talked about helping the next generation with your charities, and this is such an important topic. How do we help children avoid the pressure trap that leads to anxiety and depression? I worry
Well,
about kids these days, I really do.
yeah. I mean, the biggest problem is, what are the parents saying to the kids? Are the parents more concerned with the kids being happy, or are they more concerned with the kids being successful? Many parents will say, I don't really care how happy my kid is. I wasn't that happy. I want to make sure she's getting A's and B's and is going to go to a good college. And that's what I try to change the whole culture in America. I think we should be focused on happiness first and success second. Ultimately, if you said to somebody, why are you working so hard and making all this money? They'd say, so I can retire and be happy. But why not be happy now? So when you talk about the kids, a lot of it has to do with the parents. And it's really breaking the chain and letting them know you don't have to be perfect all the time. You will make mistakes. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you're being bullied, let us know so that we can get you some help. So it's a myriad of things. I was interviewing some kids once, and the kid out of the blue said, I want to kill myself.
Oh my god.
And it was good because there's so many kids these days that want to kill themselves, and they're cutting themselves, and every year it's getting worse and worse. So, we need to figure out the answer to this. I think a lot of it is what they're eating, as I said before. A lot of times it's the kids that get the best grades that drink and smoke the most because they're under the most pressure. Everybody thinks that it's the bad kids that drink and smoke the most, but trust me, I was so under so much pressure in college, I smoked a lot. So there's no easy answer to what you just asked me, but there's a myriad of answers. I know that at Tufts University, where I used to go, they don't do a lot of grading now. They do a lot of pass failures. So it gets a lot easier on the students. Just simply a pass or a fail.
I don't think that makes any sense at all.
Well,
I
I
really don't. I want to know where I land. Where do I
yeah,
need to improve?
yeah, yeah. No, I understand.
And you mentioned, I don't remember if it was in the virtual green room or it was at the top of the show, but you remember girls. Yeah, I think you said 10 to 17 years old. And a lot of it is because of their mobile phones, I think you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Social media is making life really difficult
Yeah,
on people.
yeah.
I talked to my son about happiness. I asked him, what's the biggest problem? And he said, it's absolutely social media. We see it all day long and see all the people who have more than us, and all the things that we'd like to have. And you always feel like you have less money than everybody else. You're less good looking than everybody else.
It's
There's
propaganda.
people who have so much more than you. Absolutely. Everybody's trying to sell you stuff, and
Yep.
they've got all of the, different ways the corporations have done all of their work to make sure that they put out the perfect ads to convince you to buy the stuff.
Years ago, this is several years ago, and I live in a very small town in Southwest Louisiana. I'm literally equidistant between Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, and I got clobbered by both of them. But some years ago, and at the time, my little neighborhood was 3 streets deep, 3 streets wide, and then they started knocking down the sugarcane fields and building houses, which really ticked me off, but you can't stop it. But the school bus pulled out in front of my house, and I happened to be down on the mailbox on the street. These 3 teenagers, and I couldn't tell you what ages they were, but they were teenagers. They get out of the bus. I could have reached out and said, "Hey, how are you doing?" They never saw me. They have
Yes.
no, they're not looking up for their from their phones. They stepped off.
Yep.
All 3 of them looked dirty. They really did. The girl in particular looked like she hadn't washed her hair in a while. Their heads were bowed. They were looking at these phones. I don't know how they didn't trip on the steps. They walked past me, never saw me, started walking down the street 3 in a row because, nice quiet neighborhood. They didn't speak to one another. They didn't look up.
Yeah.
And they all of them I call it a dowager's hump, where your shoulders are
Yeah.
hunched forward.
Well, that's the new thing. Everybody's gonna have
Neck
like
and
a
yeah,
scoliosis because
yeah,
that's when you're
yeah,
looking over your phone.
yeah.
I don't know. We have a young nephew, and it's so frustrating for us because he's on the phone 24 hours a day. My wife and I go every Saturday night for a date night, and we see 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds, and the man and the wife are just looking at their phones the entire dinner. So they're setting a bad example. The phones are terrible,
They really are,
for
and
us.
yeah, they are. I hide mine, mine's often underneath a cat. I don't use it. I use it to take pictures of my cats and to text friends. It's a very expensive photo gallery, but I was at church at Christmas, Christmas Eve, pageant, if you will, and when it came time for everybody to go to the bathroom, get a drink, and then come back, I saw this beautiful little family, blonde-headed little children and beautifully dressed. All and these kids, I don't think they might have been between 5 and 7 years old. All of them never got out of that pew, and they were all looking at their screens, all of them,
Oh,
the
oh,
babies, and I just went, "You have got to be" I think I said it out loud, "You have got to be kidding me."
mm,
And
yeah,
that has stuck with me. This was, again, a long time ago, but I look at these things, and that's just not natural.
yeah, yeah. And then they have, when I was growing up, we played soccer and football and baseball across the street all the time. And my son was the same way, but this generation, they don't play outside. They don't converse. They say that these kids don't even know how to communicate with other people.
Well, and people say they don't have any manners. Well, that's actually true. They
Mm,
don't know how to communicate. So how are they
absolutely.
going to get jobs? How are they going to be the best at whatever they want to do in their industry or if they're a checker in a grocery store, you have to look up and say hi. They can't even do that.
Yeah, we're finding that a lot of kids are really spoiled these days. They don't want to work. The workforce, it's
Yeah.
really difficult right now to find, employees I'm in the auto parts business. That was my business. And I talked to the guys that used to work for me and I said, what's going on? They said the biggest problem is nobody wants to work.
That's true. So I guess my question here is what should parents and mentors be doing differently to bring awareness to this total disconnect? How can they help them?
Well, I think they should be educating themselves. I mean, what you're really talking about is the cutting edge. There's all sorts of new research on how we can help people with the iPhones because it's just starting to get worse and worse and worse. And people don't necessarily have the answers. They do believe that the parents should limit the kids to a certain amount of time on the iPhone each day. They should make sure they know what the kids are looking at because there are so many predators out there that they could be
Oh, yeah.
playing one of the games and the predator's pretending that he's a 15-year-old boy, but he's actually a 40-year-old man. So it's just limiting them as much as you possibly can and making sure you know what they're watching.
When I was a kid, my mom would say, "Okay, you can watch Saturday cartoons." I think it was Saturday. And then you've got to turn that TV off. They wouldn't. My siblings were addicted. I just took my books and got as far away outside as I could. But I remember even then people were saying you can't let that television babysit your kids.
Right. Well,
And
that's
now
definitely what's
it's
going on.
phones and iPads. So
Yeah, it's terrible.
it's
So we're
it's
figuring it out.
worrisome.
We're, we're figuring it out the best we can. Schools, at least in Foxborough, where I live, they're eliminating phones in schools. They're not allowed to have them in school, which is a real positive. Um, but it's a long way to go. This is a real problem in society. And like all problems, sometimes it's slow to figure out.
Well, it's awareness, and I do wonder how aware we are of look, things are moving so quickly. I love AI, I do, but it changes practically every day. I'm a web developer by trade. I write code, I stay on top of these things, and even I can't keep up.
Oh my God, you're smart.
Well,
Web developer.
yeah, I've been doing that for a long time, and then I started my podcast 18 years ago. So because I do know that I was going to fall into the habit of being lonely and not recognizing that I was lonely, and that I did need to get my voice heard and help other people get their voices heard. So it was a natural fit for me. But without this podcast, I wouldn't get to meet people like you. I just wouldn't.
Mm, That's fantastic.
I love it. I get to do it 3 times a week. I have a good time.
I
But
know you have a huge following too.
I do.
Congratulations.
I
That's
do.
fantastic.
Yeah, and I never saw that coming, I have to tell you, but I'll tell you why that is, because of my guest. I'm not the important one in this conversation, you are.
Well, thank you.
But I wanted to ask you very, very quickly. Oh, we're gonna run out of time pretty soon. What do people often get wrong when trying to fix, and I'm using air quotes, their mental health? Is it awareness? Is it what do they do? And I know you said exercise and, dietary, that's also important, but what else can they do?
Well, the most important thing you can do, as I said, is I'd say my week 3, which is being kinder to yourself. If you're always picking at yourself and always telling yourself how bad you are, and every time you make a mistake during the day, you do 100 things right and one thing wrong, and you find that one thing wrong and beat yourself up the whole day, you're going to feel really bad about yourself. So it's taking things, easier, not being so hard on yourself, I think is the most important thing. And depression, you got to take it seriously. So many people say, you know what? This is just a part of my life. My mother said she had depression. My dad had depression. No, you can get better. I'm a huge proponent of medication. Um, I still take medication today because I was prone to the breakdown and I want to stay in a good place. And medication will not necessarily make you happy, but it will certainly do a good job in keeping you up and not allowing you to go down so far. So I think the biggest mistake people make is to think that they should just let, the depression stay and deal with it the rest of their lives. They don't have to. Maybe 50 years ago you have to, but with modern medicine, you can't believe what, one pill during a day will do for you. So I just think people too often think that they'll just go about it and live with it.
I think you're right. I mean, I've known and been around a lot of people who were either mildly or really badly manic depressive. And for a long kind of time, nobody knew how to diagnose that. They didn't know what it was. And when people do get on medication, they do better, but then they always go off for some reason. Yeah, I don't need it anymore. Yeah, you do.
Well, once you go off, and I certainly did a couple times myself, once you go off it enough times, you'll never go off it again. So I think it's natural for people to try to go off it
Oh,
because of the
okay.
stigma. And you tend to gain a little bit of weight. It can actually affect your sex life a little bit, but it doesn't always do that. So people will try to go off it. And sometimes they're fine. A lot of people who suffer from depression, it's a one-time thing. But other people, it's your brain's biochemistry, and you go off it,
Exactly.
you're gonna wind up messed up again.
Yeah, I don't know why people say, well, there's something wrong with you. If it's a chemistry issue, fix it. It
Yeah, it's
can
just
be
like
fixed.
cancer.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. Bullying. I'm going to go right back to that because I genuinely don't understand how kids develop. And you explained it a little bit, but don't these kids feel like crap when they know they're bullying somebody? I mean, doesn't it bother them or are they just not aware?
It doesn't bother them at all. I mean,
Uh,
it makes them feel fantastic because while they're doing it, they're the king. They're on top of the mountain and they're hurting all these younger people. I think when you're older, but even old people bully. If you
oh,
go
yeah.
to an office, you'll see there's one guy that is really picking on another person. It's constant. So it's just maybe it's a part of human nature, and hopefully at some point you realize you're really hurting someone, and it affects you. I have a good friend, and she was bullied by a boy because she was foreign, and he bothered her all throughout high school, and she is now 56 years old. And last year she drove up to get gas at a gas station. And there he was. And she left the gas station. She couldn't even get out of her car because she was so traumatized. So bullying can affect you for the rest of your life.
That's horrifying. If anyone listening to you today feels like they should be happy but isn't, grab the book. I mean,
Thank
that's
you.
that's going
Thank
to
you
be
so much.
my biggest recommendation. Get the book and go to Udemy and get the whole course. I think that's a smart way to do it too. The book is great, but I think having workbooks and, other ways to listen to it, that's always helpful. Not everybody wants to read. Look, I read anything. I'll read the back of a cereal box, but, sometimes I just wanna hear. I'll be honest with you, when I get these books, and I did it with yours, I've read the book 2.5 to 3 times, I've reviewed it, I've read it. Then I went to Kindle and I got that. And if you've got an Audible, I will often go get that too, and I'm reading and listening 3 different ways.
That's amazing. You definitely are an introvert because I wouldn't
I
have
am.
nearly the amount of time. Let me just let everybody know because they might not know about Udemy. If you go to my website at toddpatkin.com, it's TODDPATKIN.com. TODD for Todd, Patkin, PATKIN.com. That's my website, and you'll see buy the course, and that will take you right to Udemy, and you can buy the course. That's the easiest way to do it. As I said, it's very inexpensive.
It is, and go get it, seriously, and I was going to ask you to tell our listeners where to connect with you, but you just did that, and thank you for that. So before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to let our audience know? And I wanted to ask this, just kind of a personal question that popped up. What does happiness mean to you today compared to before your journey?
I think the most important thing to do is to learn to love yourself just because. I'm not even going to end that sentence. Too many of us say, you know what, I if I get a straight A, I can love myself. Then, if I meet the right person, I'll be able to feel love, that I love myself. Just love yourself now.
Mhm.
I can honestly tell you, I just love myself for really no reason. I do dumb stuff. I laugh at it. Just try to get to a point where you realize that, you're a gift and, God made you just the way that you are. So love yourself.
This is, and I wrote this down when you were talking earlier, we're getting into the wedding season. And I see this all the time. Wow, once we're married and we're a couple, we're gonna be happy. Well, what's wrong with you right now?
Right.
Why do you have to have the wedding? I don't get that at all. In fact, I roll my eyes a lot when I see that. It's like, no, it's not gonna be perfect. That's the beginning of a very different journey. So, gird your loins.
I
Okay.
think you just need to learn to love yourself just because it doesn't always have to be, you don't always have to be perfect.
Oh, nobody's I try. And I'm perfect for about 3 minutes, that's all I've got, and then I just laugh at myself. Well, listen, everybody, today on Your Partner in Success Radio, I had a meaningful conversation with Todd Patkin, and in Finding Happiness, he opens up how a life filled with success and achievement gave way to deep anxiety and depression, and then how he found his way back. It's an honest, heartfelt story, and it's a guide for anyone feeling overwhelmed, burned out, or searching for joy again. So be sure to connect with him at toddpatkin.com. Follow him on Instagram, X, and Facebook, I think, to keep up with his message of hope and happiness. And this is Denise Griffitts, and I am looking forward to you joining me each week for more stories of real impact. Todd, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Denise. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.